Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the channel. I am the Cajun Knight. This is the Cajun Knight News Drop, and let's get right into it. Our lead story this morning is going to be talking about Iran. Now, everybody has been waiting to see what Iran would do in response to the Israeli attacks that took place. And in the middle of all of this, as everybody is waiting and hanging in the balance to see what will happen next, what will Iran do, now we're hearing from European intelligence that Iran's big play right now is to send hundreds and hundreds of missiles to Russia to be used on the front lines against Ukraine. Now, what specific missiles are we talking about here? Specifically, we are speaking about the FATH 360. That's FATH 360 missiles. Now, this is a short-range, satellite-guided tactical ballistic missile. Now, the way these rockets are fired is actually out of the tubes on the back of a truck. There's 6 tubes per truck. The reload time is to be accounted for, but essentially it's one of those that you've seen on the news. These trucks with these mounted turrets with 6 rockets on it, and they take off. This weapon is seen as Iran's response to another very similar weapon system called the HIMARS. You may have heard of it being used in Ukraine. We keep sending Ukraine more HIMARS missiles to use against Russia. This is Iran's response to the HIMARS. However, it is not exactly comparable as far as its capabilities. The FAT 360 was unveiled in 2020, and it has the capability of launching a 330-pound warhead to its designated target. And again, this is a satellite-guided rocket. The weapon is purported to be able to hit its target at 4 times the speed of sound anywhere within a 75-mile diameter. However, I should stress that this is allegedly, because as of time of recording, this weapon system has actually never seen combat if we are to believe the weapons manufacturers and the Iranians. This weapon has never seen frontline combat, so this would be its inaugural run, so to speak. That being said, on paper, this would be a weapon that would potentially be able to turn the tide of a war if used properly, still untested. So we shall stand by and see what happens in the near future. As of time of recording, dozens of Russian troops are in Iran learning how to use this weapon system so that they can use it on the front lines against Ukraine in the very near future. Hundreds of these weapon systems are allegedly earmarked to head to Moscow in a deal that was allegedly signed in Tehran December 13th of last year. It will only be a matter of weeks before the Russian troops training in Iran are ready to use these weapon systems. Now, with that being said, hundreds of these missiles. Now, how many trucks are going to be delivered? How many launching platforms are going to be delivered? Well, that's kind of hard to say. 6 missiles per truck, you do the math, but it does seem like it will be more than just a few. Now, NATO and the United States are well aware of this situation. The American Department of Defense did release a statement on this topic saying that if this was to happen, there would be, quote, swift and severe responses if Iran were to move forward with such transfers, end quote. The same representative that gave that quote also made mention of the fact that if this was to happen, this would be Iran teaming up with Russia in a way that they have never done before. In the past, the two countries have been allies for economic reasons and in certain ways military reasons. Nothing to this scale. Right? Nothing to this scope. Multiple countries have said their piece on this matter and have said that this deal does not need to happen. Russia has refused to comment on it. Ukraine has also been pretty quiet on the matter, and Iran has said that they have no intentions of transferring any weapons of any type to Russia. They don't even know where these claims are coming from. Right? So I'm actually going to go ahead and read you an article from ArmyRecognition.com. This is Global Defense News. Iran to supply FAT 360 ballistic missiles to Russia for use in Ukraine conflict. Okay, this was posted August the 11th of this year. Multiple intelligence sources have reported that Russian personnel have traveled to Iran to train on the FAT 360 missile systems. This information, disclosed by Reuters on August 9, 2024, indicates that Russia may be preparing to integrate the Iranian-made ballistic missiles into its military arsenal. On August 10, 2024, Iran's UN representative refuted the Reuters report from August 9th that claimed that Iran is planning to supply hundreds of missiles to Russia for its war in Ukraine. I'm actually going to go ahead and show you a picture that's associated associated with this article now. So this is the weapons platform that I'm talking about. You see the truck, you see 6 tubes. I see some of them over here with 4, some of them with 3 on the bottom row, but it has the capabilities of having 6 tubes on the launching platform. Okay, we go on to read, according to military experts, the acquisition of the THAAD-360 ballistic missile system could allow Russia to diversify its missile deployment strategies. By employing the Iranian systems for shorter range targets, Russia could conserve its own ballistic missile stockpile for strikes on more distant objectives, potentially extending its operational reach in the ongoing conflict with Ukraine. Now, all of that being said, an unnamed, very high-ranking Iranian defense official did say that no, THAAD-360 missiles were a part of any type of deal that has been made with Russia and Iran in any time recent. However, this wouldn't exactly be Iran's first time sending missiles to Russia in this war. There is a bit of a precedence here. In February of this year, as a matter of fact, 2024, 400 Fatah 110 short-range ballistic missiles had been shipped from Iran to Russia. However, later reports showed that maybe that shipment was held up, maybe it didn't actually happen, but beside the point, the intention was there to send weapons to Russia. However, this is a different step. Those were short-range missiles that are going to go from A to B. This is satellite operated that allegedly are hitting things with a little more oomph than 110 Fatahs. Now, on another side of this, I could understand why Iran would make this deal. They have a weapons platform that has never been battlefield tested. There happens to be a battlefield going on that their ally, a friend of theirs, a long-standing friend of theirs, is currently involved in. So rather than test your shiny new toy on a war that you really needed to work on, I understand why they would send it to be tested on another war. We're like, hey, if it doesn't work, it's not us. It wasn't our people. It wasn't us that died. We're good. Hey, sorry. Still in the testing phase, homie. But I also understand why this group would be a little hesitant to use it for their own first offensive, seeing as how it's never been tested. Selling some to Russia makes a lot of sense to me, I'm not going to lie. However, the entire world has come down and said, no, we really don't want you to make that deal. Again, Iran has said, what deal? Russia isn't picking up the phone at the moment. Shocker. But as Russia would look at this, why would they say no to taking on more weapons to help them in their efforts? Makes perfect sense to me. So with the new data that will be coming back from the Russian front, once they get that system dialed in, you know they are going to mass produce it on scale for whatever and whoever their enemies may be. Now, allegedly, the THAAD-360 has been designed to where the only thing that could knock it out of the sky is the American Patriot system or something akin to the Israeli Iron Dome. The Ukrainian short-range ground-to-air defenses have been doing well thus far, but they are overtaxed and they are starting to falter, and it is at this time assumed that they may fall short if an all-out frontal assault was to happen. The THAAD-360 gives them the potential to make that full frontal assault happen. And Russia is really searching for a way to punish Ukraine right now, especially when it comes to them invading mainland Russia and taking over the Kursk region. This also could fall in line with another tactic that we have seen used not just in Ukraine, but in Israel as well. You will have a massive frontal surge where you will have tons of artillery, tons of rockets fired at short range. And most of these are considered what's trash rockets, right? They're little rockets that have been made with whatever materials, a little propellant and cool, whatever. If they hit their target, cool. If they don't, cool. They were cheap. And they send these en masse. They'll send 1,000 of them at once to make all of the ground-to-air defense missiles knock them out of the sky. While the ground-to-air defenses are reloading those tubes, then they will send in their heavier artillery that they will have no defense to shoot out of the sky. The THAAD-360 gives them the ability to do that across the entire front line at a much more rapid pace than they've been able to do thus far. Now, while these rocket systems reaching the front lines allegedly is a very big risk, and one that I don't think Ukraine is willing to play with at this time, we also need to acknowledge that that means that right now, in real time, the leaders of Russia and the leaders of Iran are acknowledging that it is in their mutual interest to grow closer as allies. Iran is a pariah nation. They have been a constant thorn in the sides of most of the Western world for quite some time, pretty much since the Ayatollah took over. They are constantly stirring the pot in the Middle East. Their reach is clearly seen in Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Israel. The list goes on and on. Them growing closer to Russia is not a good sign for the rest of the world. Russia equally has become a pariah nation ever since the beginning of this war, although slowly but surely more countries are under the table, coming to the table to actually get back into doing business with Russia, whether they're wanting that to be public knowledge or not. However, Russia is still suffering. Now, I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, they haven't been because of this, because of that. Look, the price of oil hasn't dropped hard enough for Russia to feel it enough for their economy to be crippled. And then you also look at the BRIC system that is currently going down. You could see why they have been limping along in the way that they have. However, they have been making it work, and that does need to be acknowledged. They are a resilient people. Now, Iran has been intentionally kept in the dark for a very long time. You could look at the way that multiple countries have done everything they can to put barriers between them and their nuclear program. There's a reason why other countries have gone out of their way to try to keep Iran in the Stone Age as much as they can. However, this only works if Iran doesn't have a superpower friend that's pulling them out of the Dark Ages. Enter Russia. Because while Iran may be sending Russia weapons, let's keep in mind that Russia is also sending things to Iran as we speak. Russia has recently sent Iran Iskander short-range ballistic missiles, along with an electric warfare package called the Murmansk BN. Also, Russian-made Su-35 fighter jets will also be heading to Iran in the very near future. Now, as we wait for Iran to launch its counterattack, if and when it decides to do so, we need to keep in mind that none of these weapons that I just listed off will be able to be used by Iran. They currently do not have them. They are supposed to be coming later this year. So now we have these two pariah states that are equally enemies of most of the Western world as of the time of recording, growing closer and closer. And the rest of the world is watching them with bated breath to see what will happen next, so that we can address it accordingly. Now let's move on to our next story, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk a little bit about Venezuela, which right now currently seems like it is in the middle of a true people taking the power back from the government revolution. Now, we know that the election that just took place is what kind of started this whole thing. Just a quick recap. Maduro had an election that took place. He lost handily, but he refused to let out the actual numbers to the people. However, very, very similar to the elections that took place in America a couple years back, how certain DNC members were cut off at the knees so that others could succeed, even though that wasn't what the numbers showed. Essentially, Maduro just did that. When everybody went to bed on the night when the election had taken place, when the ballots were being tallied, the incumbent was losing. Edmundo Gonzalez Aricia was slated to win and become the new president of Venezuela. However, when they awoke the next morning, somehow Maduro had taken the victory, refused to acknowledge that anything else had happened, and refused to tell the people what the true ballot numbers were. UN experts have been quoted as saying that this election lacked the basics of integrity. The problem is that 80% of the ballots were automatically generated and released to the public that showed that Edmundo Gonzalez had won with 67% of the vote. And while the government refuses to release any documentation, even backing its own claim that they won the election, videos have started to come up on social media of political dissidents and civilians just basically pissed off, breaking down statues of Maduro's mentor, Hugo Chavez. Now, we do know that the streets of Caracas were wild for the past 3 weeks, with gangs, masked gunmen running rampant. The riots had spread not just in the inner city, but it even spread to the countryside. And instead of just relieving power and giving the people what they wanted, Maduro, who very similar to other autocrats in the past, decided to double down and crack down on his people. The entire time, he has been spitting that he believes that he is the victim of a U.S.-backed coup. And to be honest with you, he has a little bit of a historical precedence for that one.
South American country which has had its government overthrown by the CIA since 1947. Costa Rica in 1948. Guatemala, 1954, El Salvador, 1979, Nicaragua, 1981, Panama, 1989, Paraguay, 1954, Brazil, 1964, Peru, 1968, Chile, 1973, Uruguay, 1973, Argentina, 1976, and Venezuela in 2002. Many of these were perceived as ideologically opposed to the United States, were leftist dictatorships, or were some combination of the two.
He believes that this coup has been going against him this entire time and that is why his country is revolting against him. Never mind the fact that he has oversaw hyperinflation and a soaring murder rate and an exodus, right, that resulted in 25% of his country literally evacuating. That couldn't be it. That clearly must not be the reason that the people are pissed off at him. It is obviously because America has set in political dissidents against him. Clearly, by the Venezuelan government standards, any protests must be orchestrated by their enemies. Therefore, the police are allowed to use whatever force necessary to quell the issue. Maduro has authorized Operation Knock Knock as a way to crack down on the issue at hand in his country of his people revolting against him. According to New York Times, activists and journalists have had their passports canceled, meaning that they cannot flee the country. Human rights organizations believe that 1,300 people have been arrested. The Venezuelan regime, however, claims that 2,400 people have been taken prisoner as a part of Operation Knock Knock. The prisons that they are being brought to, by the way, are Tocorin and Toquiita. These two are the most violent prisons in the country. According to reports, these prisoners are being held without any legal representation, and the Miami Herald even released an article. 100,000 Venezuelans are considering leaving the country right now. Keep in mind, again, those people that are languishing in these prisons right now are being held without even being told if they've committed a crime or not. On the other hand, a poll done from the Venezuelan Society on August the 11th says that over 40% of the people in Venezuela would consider leaving if they had the means. To quote the Miami Herald article, as a matter of fact, it says, quote, "This time the mass migration could happen quickly. The mega-analysis survey suggests that finding out that equivalent of about 600,000 people are considering leaving before the middle of next month, while an additional 930,000 would leave between October and December. We also don't need to ignore the fact that the Venezuelan refugee crisis is literally the worst on this side of the globe. Currently, 7.7 million people have already left the country. Colombia and Brazil are pretty much at max capacity on the amount of refugees they can take. However, I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't get pushed to new maximums in the very, very near future. Even though most of the countries around the globe acknowledge that this election was a fraud, the nations of the world are kind of standing by. In the words of the Financial Times, no deadline has been set for Caracas to produce the voting tallies. That would prove whether Maduro won, and there is no word on what will happen if it does not. The paper goes on to list ways in which different countries could actually start putting a little bit more pressure on Venezuela to do what they want. For example, the United States could cancel licenses for Western companies to extract oil and gas in Venezuela, and that's a major source of valuable income for Maduro and his organization. Now, allegedly, there was a behind-the-scenes attempt to get Maduro to retire by the United States government. Basically, they said, hey, bro, we will remove the drug charges on your name, and we will allow you to leave the country safely and quietly retire to Cuba. Retire is one word. Go into exile is another one. Look, these are phrases, right? These are words. Either way it goes, he will live the rest of his life in luxury in Cuba. However, Maduro pretty much told them, nah, bruh, I got my whole country here. I don't need that. So what's Maduro going to do? It's very possible that he follows in the footsteps of Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus or Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua and simply turn his country into a massive police state. Another option would be one that former Venezuelan Foreign Minister Celso Amorim just proposed last week. Speaking to the Brazilian channel Globo News, he said, quote, "I don't want to use the expression civil war, but I feel very afraid," end quote. So the former foreign minister of this country is already saying that there is writings on the walls and the potential makeup of a civil war to break out in this country as we speak. However, former U.S. diplomat Tom Shannon, who worked extensively with Venezuela during his time, thinks that a civil war is a very, very far stretch, and he believes that the Romania solution, quote unquote, is more likely what could shake out here. For anybody who's curious about what the Romania solution is, let's talk about it. In December of 1989, Romania rose up in a bloody revolution against its communist dictator Nicolae Ceausescu. I'm sure I am butchering that pronunciation. My apologies. Long story short, over 1,000 were killed in the violence and the government collapsed. The dictator was shot dead on live TV. Tom Shannon is thinking that that's more of a realistic possibility in the country of Venezuela. So how's it going to shake out? Is Maduro going to become the iron-fisted dictator that just puts his country in a police state that makes Orwell's nightmares happy? Or will he be removed from power forcibly by his people? Or will he step down voluntarily and go live out the rest of his life in general luxury? Who's to say? We will be keeping you updated on this as it progresses. Let's move on to our next topic. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I do have to... I should have put this in a different order, and you'll understand why here in a moment. This article came to me kind of out of left field, not going to lie. I wasn't even looking for it. It just magically presented itself to me, and I said, oh, the Cajun Knight simply must speak on this. It's almost out of my control at this point. Here we go. German police in chainmail, apparently. This was a tweet or an X, if whatever, that was put out by Matt Silverfox. Let's talk a little bit about this, shall we? The tweet shared by Matt Silverfox on Twitter showcasing German police officers dressed in chainmail has sparked quite the curiosity and amusement online. In the photo, several officers can be seen wearing what appears to be medieval-style chainmail armor, complete with helmet and shields. The sight is certainly unexpected and has left many wondering about the story behind this unique attire choice. While it may seem like a scene straight out of a historical reenactment or a fantasy movie, the truth is actually quite different. The German officers in the photo are part of a specialized unit known as the riot police, who are trained to handle large-scale protests and demonstrations. The chainmail armor they are wearing is not made of metal, but rather a modern lightweight material that offers protection against projectiles and other potential threats. So this one kind of messed me up a little bit. I'm not going to lie, I had to do a little extra research on this. So I do know that cops in the United Kingdom cannot carry weapons, right? They carry mace, they carry batons, they carry non-lethal weapons, and what they pretty much have to do is, if they have a crazy person or someone out there that's causing harm or a potential threat, what the police officers do is typically section off the entire city block that this person is like behaving crazy in, get the people out of the way that they need to, get everybody safe, and then they pretty much just hold him there until their version of SWAT officers come with a weapon to actually put down the threat. Because they don't even believe that their police officers are trained and ready enough to be able to carry weapons like that. So I was curious if Germany had something similar going on, and maybe that was the reason for the chainmail. Come to find out, no. Germany has multiple different styles of police officers and different levels of constables, all of these things. But the fact that they are wearing chainmail with shields and weapons is not a joke. But why would they be wearing this, right? Not just the riot police. I understand. You want to have a shield and the helmet with the face shield thing down to protect you from the projectiles that may be thrown at you and things. I understand this. But chainmail, for anybody who doesn't know, is excellent against preventing stabs and slashes from edged and sharp objects. For riot police to be carrying this, that's a little different. But if you also look at the refugees that Germany has taken in for the last couple of years, more like a good few, you'll notice that their weapon of choice happens to be blades and edged weapons. It makes sense to me that the German police, in that regard, are starting to armor themselves to meet the demands. Although I feel like we might be reverting back in armor, right? We went from bullet bouncers and Kevlar to armor and, chainmail. I gotta tell you, though, all jokes aside, the Cajun Knight approves of this upgrade in the armaments for the German police officers. I gotta say, I'm a bit of a fan. maybe I'm a bit biased. Maybe the Cajun Knight's a bit biased. Who knows? Who knows? But it's bothering me, though, because I feel like this can be improved upon, Germany. You have been known for centuries as some of the best armor smiths. You have shaped the world of sword making with your two-handed bastard sword. And you come to the party with the basics. What is it? This is a little chainmail, bro. This is okay, but it's not the way. This, Germany, this is the way. Much better. Much, much better. Much better. Much more protected. All the things. And still got the chainmail, homie. I'm just saying. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if more police officers in Europe don't start doing this. Kind of a homage to their old ways, if you will. But you know, I don't necessarily see this as an all-around bad. They're using hand-to-hand weapons, and now the German police are, you know, gearing up for that. I feel like you should be able to match fire with fire. And again, I mean, like, if they want to bring a certain thing to the party, time to get your mettle tested there, protester. I'm just saying. Anyway, everybody, that is going to wrap up the news drop from the Cajun Knight. I am, in fact, the Cajun Knight, Jacob Mook. Thank you for stopping by. We'll see you next time.